presentation by Josh Artuzo, the Director of Community Development, and Matt Chatfield, the Executive Director of the Webster Economic Development Alliance. And it's on the possible next steps on 600 Ridge Road, the old Webster Furniture Stripper. So I'm going to hand the baton to Josh.
Thanks, Supervisor. So I'm just going to go over a brief recent history of some milestone events pertaining to 600 Ridge Road, which is located at the northwest corner of Ridge and Gravel. So this property, the former Webster Furniture Stripper site, was abruptly closed in 2006 and essentially abandoned by its owner. So approximately between 2009 and 2020, this property was offered for sale at the tax foreclosure auction. There were no bidders, and the county opted not to take title to the property each year. So the property continually remains vacant and abandoned. So in an effort to try and address this long problem property, the town engaged with conversations with Monroe County and ultimately entered into an intermunicipal agreement that gave the town temporary control of the property for the purpose of environmental investigation. So the town back last fall did utilize the county's engineering firm, Day Engineering, to perform the environmental testing approximately from November to January. In April of this year, we held a public information meeting at Spry Middle School to report the results of that Phase 2 testing, the results of which were inconclusive and called for additional testing. So in June of this year, we engaged with Knopf Shaw LLP, a local environmental law firm, to help us with exploring options and developing strategies for this property. So over the past 2 months, we've been working with Knopf Shaw, as well as the EPA, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, as well as the Webster Economic Development Alliance, to develop potential acquisition strategies and investigate liabilities associated with the property. So as recent as 2 days ago, the county resumed its tax foreclosure auction, I believe for the first time since COVID. This property was once again offered for auction due to the delinquent taxes. There were no bidders, and the county did not take title of the property. Now I just want to go over some brief highlights of a broader effort for this West Webster area that we've been working towards. So back in July of 2021, the town was awarded $90,000 from the Genesee Transportation Council to complete a West Webster revitalization plan. So we were finally able to get that initiative kicked off officially in March of 22. We formed a committee of area business owners and residents to help guide us in that process. Last December, we also hired a consulting firm to perform an income survey of the area. And the results of that survey indicate that the area income does meet hardship status for a variety of grant programs. In January of this year, WEDA applied for approximately $1.8 million in the Restore New York grant program to assist with rehabilitation of certain vacant properties within the area. And then in May of this year, we were able to finalize the plan, the revitalization plan document. One of the primary recommendations really emphasized the need to address the four corners, and this being one of them at 600 Ridge Road, definitely identified as a top priority. And I will be coming back to the board later this fall at a workshop to kind of discuss the contents of the plan, the recommendations, and pursuit of adoption and potential zoning changes that would help facilitate our vision for this area. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Chatfield, the Executive Director of the Webster Economic Development Alliance, and he's going to talk about some potential next steps and milestone dates.
Sure, great, thank you. Actually, can we keep it on this slide real quick? I just want to add a little bit of color in between the lines for Josh's great summary here. So part of what's setting up the discussion that we're about to have is the county was actually the one that was given the temporary incidence of ownership. And that was only like a 60-day time frame. There was a very limited amount of time under which that temporary incidence of ownership for environmental investigations was able to be had. And that ended in February. So ultimately, in order for although further testing was required, there was no time available to the town and the county to conduct further testing, nor was there really funds or access to the property. So there was it was really a multitude of issues that prevented further investigations, which is why we're going to talk a little bit about options for local control here moving forward. Next slide, please. Oh, perfect, great. So we've had numerous discussions, as in we've probably met nearly a dozen times between April and today, talking about what is the potential future path for 600 Ridge Road. Since the acquiring the services of Knopf Shaw, we've had several meetings to talk about how do we gain local control and what are the processes for that. In discussions with both Monroe County and DEC. And recently, we had also had a board meeting with my board of directors, which is 5 members, the supervisor of the town, the mayor of the village, the superintendent of the school district, president, CEO of the chamber, and the president of the BID.
Is this the right place?
Yes.
That board, we described how WIA could ultimately, potentially, take title to the property through the town, and then be the one to hold onto the property and try and facilitate rehabilitation, and then transfer to the private domain. That is the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to not have this be held in the public domain for any extensive period of time, only to utilize the powers and benefits of either the municipality or the local development corporation, WIA, to obtain proper funding and access to resources, specialized resources, through either the DEC or the EPA to move forward with rehab and remediation as needed. We've clearly been doing a lot in the past 7 days here. Notice of this meeting, there was a town board discussion that took place last week.
And I know that we were putting these materials together at breakneck speed today. We did not last Thursday have an executive session, discussion on this.
Perfect. Well, that was my mistake. So the 26th, which was 2 days ago, the county did not receive any solicitations, any offers for the purchase of the property. We are continuing to discuss the potential sale of that property to the town of Webster for the sum of $1. And parts of that discussion are how do we limit the potential liability of the town for doing so. There's a couple actions, and we do have Melissa Val, one of our attorneys here. I'm not going to pretend to understand all the legal jargon. We will definitely query her, but I do understand that the Phase 1 report, the Phase 1 ESA, would be a requirement to perform the proper due diligence, and that offers you protections as a buyer in the eyes of the federal government and the state government. We also need to enter into an agreement, we as in the town of Webster, and potentially we as a participant, enter into an agreement, a covenant not to sue with DEC, which provides further protections for any future remediation actions that we have. The town also needs to enter into a letter of intent with Monroe County and for that potential purchase or transfer of the property, and that would go through proper channels. That needs to be introduced by the legal department to the legislature first, and then goes for discussion amongst the legislature on the 10th would be the earliest date available, 10th of October. And then also the town board would need to declare itself lead agent towards that action as well, the transfer of real property. So our hope is that by the 10th, we could have a general consensus from the Monroe County Legislature that this is in fact what's in the best interest of the public moving forward. We do have a potential timeline. We have some troubles with the timeline. We are currently identifying one particular grant resource through the EPA that is probably our best path forward to obtaining both investigation funding and remediation funding all in one grant. In prior years, the grant was due like November 21st to November 22nd. We were hopeful that that was the same timeline this year. They moved it up a week on us, and unfortunately, the earliest date we could potentially, if all boards were in approval and all things went smoothly, November 14th would be the earliest date. So currently, we're off by a day from having title in the hands of the town to being able to apply for that grant. So our hope is that we can talk with the EPA in particular. Maybe there's a paper trail of intentions, good intentions on the part of the town and the county to go through with said transfer on the 14th, one day after the grants or application are due. And that's really the series of events. As you can see, it's the timing is tight for all of them, right? We're trying to do a lot of things. And largely, majority of it, the reason for the haste was so we would be eligible to apply for this particular grant resource this calendar year. So, and also, the further that property remains in the public or in the private domain and that isn't maintained, the more difficult we are, the more difficulty we're going to have in really moving the power forward. We need a little control.
And Matt, the reality is that until the Tuesday, September 26th election happened, this is all a moot point. You can't, the county doesn't have the ability to not do the due process of a foreclosure auction. We can talk with them about the concept of doing this before the 26th, but that auction needed to take place.
Absolutely.
And so that's really why the time frame is so
And
tight.
up until the 26th, that's all that did happen.
We couldn't begin it
Was
before
discussions.
now.
There was really no exchange of
No.
any sort of paper. So it's a tight time frame. But clearly, I can answer any questions you may have, but our legal counsel is here to answer any very particular questions.
I'm just curious about the liability, potential liability in the town, if you could give us some specifics.
So, I'd love to give you specifics on liability.
Thank you.
I am obligated not to disclose any attorney-client privileged communications and the communications we've had with the town, so I think that specific question is better for an executive session, so I don't know if you think this is a good time, but I think, without getting into specifics, and certainly it's not a secret that contaminated properties carry some level of liability with them. There are, as Matt discussed, there are a number of things that you can do to better arm yourself to, against that liability. Matt mentioned an agreement with DEC, and that with Department of Environmental Conservation, that has, that's a big effort on DEC's part. They're really interested in working with municipalities to limit liability, to make municipalities more comfortable in becoming an owner of these exact type of properties, with the full acknowledgement that these types of properties are causing blight in communities and prohibiting revitalization, which is exactly the situation we find ourselves in here today. So, DEC is very outspoken about the willingness to try to alleviate the potential risk and liability, specifically for municipalities, with a cooperation type agreement that Matt had mentioned. mentioned. That help answer?
And I think it's important to understand that, you know, it's been 5 months, but on April 13th or whatever at Spry, we did a presentation, Mary Harrington, Joshua Frizo, and Matt Chatfield. It took a 400-page, very technical Phase 2 testing report from Day Engineering and tried to show in layman terms what they found there. And it kind of debunked myths of the last 20 years. It is not as bad as I think people had made it out to be. And I think once the county saw the report on that, that's when they were more open to having this discussion with us. This is, you know, granted, there's more testing that has to be done, so there's always a risk that something could manifest itself. But based on being, you know, it's a 0.15 acre parcel, it's a postage stamp. Based on the boring holes going 6 inches, the boring holes going 20 feet, the water testing, there doesn't seem to be anything that is going to cause, you know, an unusual amount of remediation. We have to finish the testing. If we do this, there's always risk. The DEC agreement, I think, really would help go a long way, Charlie, in minimizing that risk. And certainly, as Matt described, the mechanism of the EPA grant almost is perfect for this scenario.
I will just say that this is certainly not the most contaminated property I've ever seen,
No.
not even close. And the next steps that were provided, I think, in the Phase 2 or that Dave had offered were, you know, pretty standard and nothing shocking.
And I know, you know, when Matt said, you know, here's this tight timeline that you're sitting here, you know, really, next week, we would have to consider three resolutions to get the ball rolling on this. We're hoping to get Day Engineering's Phase 1 quote as soon as possible to get it out to all of the board members. So they have an idea of what type of dollars we would be talking about investing. We already, as you know, I think we did it with ARPA money, Paul, the $35,000 of the Phase 2 testing in November of 22 and January 23. We're spent on that. The letter of intent for the transfer of the property from the county, that's somewhat of a sleeves from our vest. It's something that they need to go to their October 10th legislature meeting to see that we, the town board, has said, yeah, we're interested in moving this process along. And then the declaring the town board as a lead agency on seeker. From what I understand, this isn't a 1 or 2. It's called a
Unlisted.
non-listed. What does that mean? A non-listed seeker? I've gotten too much.
Short form environmental.
Thank you, Bill. Because you know what? You know I'm getting educated on 1 and 2, but now I heard this non-listed.
Unlisted. Short form environmental.
All right. All questions should go to Bill. Interestingly enough, to that tight timeline, Tuesday, October 10th, I don't know, just because the conversations we've had with county key people, it's not the 29-person legislature. We will be talking to Legislator Hebert and Johns to advocate on this if we want to move forward. But that's a 29-person legislature. That's a wild card. This could all be over on October 10th. They may, you know, vote to not pursue this, or they may. And I'm speaking on behalf of me, not the town board. If they're trying to get more out of this than basically a $1 to get it off their back, and I would not advocate for that.
And Tom, sorry, just to clarify that, so the October 10th, it's just being introduced to the county legislature, so then they'll have the committee meetings, and then the full legislature will take action on the November 14th. So really, this it's not until November 14th that we know which way the county will sway on this. I think, I think the committee meetings could
Sure.
provide some insight, but I think.
Well, you could get some color on the
Sure.
10th. I mean, you know, I've watched some tapes of those, and those 29 legislators, you know, inside voices come out, and you might get an idea of where some of them are sitting on this. And then, you know, so the board would be kept apprised all the way along through those committee meetings and this and that. Bill? All righty.
Thank you.
Melissa, thank you. Josh and Matt, thank you. It's funny, those two timelines, 2 pages, it doesn't seem to do justice for all the work that's been done in the last 3.5 years. Meetings, Zoom, this, that, crazy.
I just want to, I have to make.
Please
I'm
do,
sorry.
Jim.
This, you said, you're right, there's been a lot of work, a lot in the last 3.5 years. A lot of people have been working very hard and doing in-depth studies and reviews, and obviously we had a lot of professional assistance as well. In fact, this started a good 12 or 13 years ago. And if the county decides not to transfer it, it's going to be another 12 or 13 years, and that property's just going to sit there and do nothing. Because there's really not a lot that can be done with this property the way things are. It's not been sold to anybody who's developing it, who's intending to develop it. It's just been one roll over after another. So I think what the town's done is great for the town. It's great for the West Webster and for the community in general. So I hope the county does the right thing. Right.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you, Matt, Josh, for all your work. Come a long way in just a couple of years, so we're making good progress.